Night story. It was many years ago now. I don't remember exactly if it was in 94 or 93. I was teaching at a rural school that, due to security issues, we had to shut down. However, I had promised the mothers in the community that I would make up the classes whenever it became possible, no matter what it took, because the children were not going to miss out on their education. We had Army support. There were 2 of us teachers for 2 rural villages, teaching around 80 children between the ages of 5 and 14. We taught them basic skills: reading, writing, math, civics, ethics, and when we could, recreational activities to help them build bonds through play. Because the community was so affected by violence, most of the children were shy, isolated, and quiet, not to mention fearful. However, I remember well there was one boy, I'll call him Angel, who was very skilled with words and always willing to help the other children. Over time, Angel became a valuable support for me. He helped me run the classes better, he explained things to the other kids when they didn't understand, and he explained things to me when I didn't understand a particular situation with the kids. He was a natural-born leader. Even the older kids obeyed him. When I left that time, when I told them I didn't know for how long we would have to suspend classes, I made an agreement with Angel. I told him they should work on a Spanish and math guide together with the other kids, whenever conditions made it possible. He agreed quite happily, and his grandmother, who took care of him, told me she would keep an eye on it. What I'm about to tell you next is quite painful, so if you are a sensitive person or a child, it's better you don't continue with the story. I returned at the beginning of the year, almost 7 months later. They had been through a pretty intense situation with armed clashes, but the army now had control of the area. The families who had been displaced to other towns had started to return. That time, I went with a Red Cross mission and some government officials as I was working with an NGO at the time. When I saw that village was prioritized for missions, I asked them to include me since I knew the people. But when I arrived, it was devastating for me. The guerrillas had destroyed the school, the chapel, and had contaminated the town's water supply. Only a few houses were intact. Most were missing roofs, had holes in the walls, and doors ripped off. The streets were mountains of dried mud mixed with furniture, burned beds and chairs that had been there who knows how many days or weeks. I remember I stopped in the middle of the main street, looking around, fighting the urge to cry. Then, from behind a black plastic sheet that served as a divider in a patio, a familiar face appeared, Angel's grandmother. When she saw me, she ran out and hugged me. After several seconds, she started crying uncontrollably. 2 nurses had to catch her and give her medication to calm down because her blood pressure was through the roof. Soon, the other people began to come out, one after another, distrustful and silent. Everyone gathered in a tent set up by the army where the medical team checked on them to make sure they were okay. But no one there was okay. There were no physical wounds, but the horror was visible in their eyes. They were like bodies without souls, only pain and nothing but pain on those stiff, shattered faces. 3 people were missing: the old healer, the lady who always looked after the chapel, and Angel. I looked for Angel everywhere among all the children's faces, but he wasn't there. I looked at his grandmother, and she shrunk between her shoulders, her gaze breaking, wringing her hands as if she wanted a superior force to swallow her into the earth and end her anguish. Suddenly, she said softly in a hoarse voice, "They killed him." I felt the ground rumble beneath my feet. It was a heart-wrenching sensation. I could do nothing but crouch down and take her hand. I don't know how to explain that instant when I looked into her eyes. It was as if I were living the moment when 2 men entered her house and found Angel there with 5 other children in the living room, reading from the guide. One of them approached Angel and told him in a threatening tone to hand over those papers. The boy refused. He stood up and ran to the patio where his grandmother was. She managed to catch him in her arms when a bullet hit him in the back. She said it all happened in seconds. The men grabbed Angel, who was practically dying, and took him by force. But he never let go of the guide. His grandmother remembers the man tried to take it from him, but out of rage for what was happening, he preferred to chew it up rather than give in. She doesn't know what happened to him or where his body ended up. They took him and disappeared him. This had happened more than 2 months prior. But she told me there isn't an afternoon when she doesn't hear her grandson's voice in the living room, as if he were still there reading some story, some fable, some tale. And even though she knows it's impossible, she still held out hope that Angel would appear. I stayed in the village with the intention of helping to restore the school so the children could resume their classes. We worked every day. When it was finally ready, we painted a mural with Angel's name, and everyone in the community agreed that from then on, the school would be named after him. One afternoon, I was finishing reviewing some worksheets when I heard a commotion in the street. I looked out the window and saw several soldiers in front of Angel's grandmother's house. I worried. That woman was in very poor health. I imagined the worst, so I went back into the classroom to put the lock on the door. But just as I was about to slide the bolt, I heard a chair roll inside. I opened the door again to see what it was, and I was petrified. There, in front of the side window, the one facing the patio, was a boy standing looking outside. It was Angel. I recognized him even from behind. He was wearing little red shorts that he once told me were his favorite, and a torn, dirty white t-shirt. From the bottom hem of the shirt, drops of blood dripped, stretching until they fell onto his heels. I was so shocked I almost fainted. My body turned ice cold, and I felt as if tons of ants were crawling over my head. At that moment, someone knocked on the school door. I ran out, my heart pounding, feeling like it wanted to leap out of my chest. They told me Angel's grandmother had fainted. When I got to the house, they already had her sitting in a rocking chair and she had regained consciousness. The woman was clutching a piece of paper in her right hand. In broken, halting words, she told me she was in the kitchen when she heard a little voice from the living room, her grandson's voice, reading like he always did. She ran out, hopeful, but only found the empty living room. However, on the table were some papers, the ones she was holding in her hand. I still don't understand what explanation there could be for this, but when I reviewed them, I realized it was the guide I had left with Angel before I left. It was intact with all the questions answered. One initial theory was that the boy was alive, that they had recruited him and he was trying to leave signs. But this was ruled out 2 weeks later when they found his remains in a mass grave that one of the captured men had revealed. During the year I stayed there, it happened to me several more times. Just as I finished reviewing the worksheets and was about to lock up the classroom, I would see the boy walking down the back of the hallway towards the bathrooms. Or he would appear to me in the patio outside the window, looking towards the blackboard, that kind, lively face, like a momentary reflection that disappeared when I tried to meet his gaze. I felt him. One day, as I was reading a storybook aloud to the class, I saw out of the corner of my eye someone raising their hand in the middle of the classroom, in the center where he used to sit. I would look up, but it was no one, just the children sitting silently, waiting for me to finish the story. In the end, I had to consult with a priest because the situation had reached a point where, even in my own house, when I got up in the mornings, I saw the boy several times sitting on the curb in front of the terrace. I would open the window to see who it was, but there was no one there. The presence would simply dissipate. The priest, after hearing the whole story, told me to grade the guide as a way to let go and say goodbye. He told me to take it to the grave and leave it there. Maybe Angel just wanted to resolve that pending matter, he said. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. I had already said goodbye to everyone because I had gotten another teaching position closer to where my mom lived, who was very worried about my whereabouts at the time. Angel's grandmother gave me the guide. With a clear mind, I sat down to review it. He had only gotten 2 answers wrong, the geometry ones. He never liked that subject much. I finished grading it, wrote the score on the guide, and took it to the grave. There, in front of his headstone, I crouched down and placed it under the flower vase. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't find the words. Finally, I just said, "Thank you," and sighed deeply. Just as I was about to stand up, my head hung low, I heard footsteps approaching in front of me. I didn't look up, but I knew it was him. "See you," I said, and I left. I never felt his presence again. But I think it will be something I remember forever, and something I will never be able to explain.